Yet.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Be Awesome Together, the Going It Alone edition. Thank you all for joining in on this lovely stream on the DC Digital Media track. We are super excited to have you, and I'm also super excited to have here a bunch of wonderful podcasters who agreed to come and talk about what it takes to be a solo podcaster. So to start off, why don't we go around the horn starting on my left and introduce yourself and your show. So Tyra, who are you? What's your show? And how long you been doing it?
Hi, I'm Tyra, who was checking on our channels. So YouTube, I hope you're out there because I don't know. Just letting you know that. So I've been podcasting for decades, but I started solo podcasting about 3 or 4 years ago, and I've been off and on. I actually kicked a co-host to the curb, not for bad reasons. It just wasn't a good fit. And so now I actually have 2 shows that are out there that are just me. So a couple of years now, and Geek Meets Social is my main one.
Excellent. And Clint, how about you?
Hey, I'm Clint Hall. I'm a sci-fi author and a podcaster. My show is The Experience, Conversations with Creatives, and it's really just that. I just bring on creative people that I think are interesting and have free-flowing conversations with them. I've been doing it for about a little over 2 years now.
All right. And down on my bottom left, TV's Travis.
Hi, I'm Travis, aka TV's Travis. I started podcasting. It would have been 2019 was when I officially started podcasting, and I started doing it solo after years of just waiting for a co-host to come about, and I never got that, so I just said, screw it, I'm going to do it myself. And I do a show called Wait You Haven't Seen. It's movie podcast, but it's always somebody's first time seeing the movie. So I bring on a guest and either expose them to something brand new to them, or they bring me a movie that I haven't seen before, and then we talk about it.
Yes, and I can speak firsthand that it's fantastic. You introduced me to The Fugitive. And down on my bottom right, Bobby Blackwolf.
Hi there. So I am Bobby Blackwolf. I have been doing my podcast for. I ran out of fingers.
It's going to be funny if he says one year.
No, it'll be 19 years in a couple weeks. I started in 2005. The show, I called it the Bobby Blackwolf Show because I thought I was only going to do it for maybe 19 weeks. But it's a video game industry kind of talk show. I patterned it after an AM radio talk show. It was always live. I was on Shoutcast Internet Radio in 2005 when I started with IRC as the chat room and Skype, where people could actually call in. I even had a 1-800 number for about 10 years that people could call in to the show because that's what we did in 2005. But in 2018, we moved over to Twitch. So I do the show live on Twitch with video and using Discord for live calls. So it's still kind of the same format as an old AM radio talk show. Talk about the video game industry, things going on in video games, my stuff that I get to experience in the video game industry. And my 900th episode is in 2 weeks. And I've been doing it every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Not every week, because then I'd be almost to 1,000 episodes, but not 898 times in the last 18 years and 50 weeks or whatever. And it's over at the Voice of Geeks Network, which is a podcast network I co-founded with Rob Roberts in 2012 and partnered with him in Orange Lounge Radio. And so we're the Sunday night gaming block over at vognetwork.com.
Amazing. And I am your moderator for this wonderful experience. I'm MC Williams, the host of the Myths Your Teacher Hated podcast, which has been running for almost 8 years now, which sounds a lot less impressive coming after Bobby. But it is a mythology show that tells the stories of myths, legends, and folklore from around the world with all of the fun bits left in. Because when you actually get down into it, mythology is not clean or kid-friendly, so neither are we. Let's start at a different place this time. Let's go with Travis. Why did you decide to go with a solo format for your show?
It was literally because it was the only way I was going to get into it. I had done college radio at my local community college station for a little bit, just on the air, and tried to get a little bit of that kind of AM call-in talk show thing going, but it never got off the ground there. I had ideas for shows for a long time, and I was always waiting for that co-host to come along with me. And I had a friend. I would always have a friend or two that were like, "Yeah, I'd love to do that," and then of course flake out and not do it. And finally, I got the idea. I'm like, why don't I just have a stable of friends of mine that I know that I can rotate in and out, and I'll run the show and I'll bring them in. And so that's how it got started, and then it's just expanded from there outside of that stable to just worldwide. But it was just, if I didn't do that, I wasn't going to do a show, and I had this burning desire to do something. I had to get it out, so I just had to throw caution to the wind and go for it myself.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds like a very familiar experience for me. What about you, Clint?
Yeah, I'd kind of echo what Travis said. Is I think it wasn't exactly a choice. It was kind of what I had to do. And matter of fact, I kind of wanted a co-host, and I sort of secretly auditioned a couple people. They didn't actually know that they were being auditioned, but they were kind of being auditioned. And the truth is it's tough to convince someone to do something like this if they don't really just want to do it, right? Especially at the beginning, because there's really no tangible reward for anybody at the beginning of starting a show, especially like the show that I was doing. They just have to be super into it. Plus, part of the reason why I'm going it alone and why I chose to go it alone was because I have a super weird schedule. You know, I have multiple jobs when you count being an author and the day job and kids and being a husband and other things that I also do, that it's kind of impossible to get anyone else to match my schedule. It's hard enough to schedule my guests, let alone also then a third person to be a co-host. All that said, in a perfect world, and I know that we're all going it alone here. In a perfect world, I actually wouldn't be. I'd love to have I'd love to have partners. I like being a part of a team, but yeah, so it was necessity. Although I do think that for the kind of podcast that I do, which is a little bit more of a kind of just intimate, in-depth conversation, it might have kind of been a blessing in disguise. You know what I mean? For it to just be one-on-one, I think sometimes that can lend itself better to those types of conversations a little bit. So I don't know, maybe I was being protected from myself.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can definitely vibe with a lot of that. Bobby, let's go to you.
Yeah, so it was necessity for different reasons. There wasn't an easy way to do a virtual collaboration in 2005, especially live. So I would have needed to have found somebody local to me here in Atlanta that would be willing to do this on Sunday nights at 8:00 each and every week. And while I have the drive to do that, not many other people do. There are other people that are out there, but none of them are in Atlanta that have the same passion for the gaming industry as I did at the time. So it was essentially out of necessity. And I said, all these AM radio talk shows, they work with just one person and callers and chat. And that was my thing, is like, yes, I am the only person talking, but I always had a chat room, even when it was back when it was IRC. So I was always interacting with people. I was talking with people. They were kind of my co-host, even if they didn't have a voice. So it was that was the format I chose, because honestly, I couldn't find anybody that was willing to keep up with my schedule. And when I did do another show a couple years later with other people, they would always start finding excuses to flake out on our live broadcast. So either I'd be doing it alone, or I'd have to find somebody else to do it, or just cancel the show because it was one I couldn't do alone. And, I didn't want to put, count on other people. I got burned enough.
Tyra, what about you?
I started podcasting with a partner, which was awesome because he used to handle the recording and the editing and posting and all that kind of stuff. And we just couldn't get our schedules in sync. He does not work a typical 9-to-5 job. I'm a professor, so my life is crazy all the time. And when I was starting back up, I was like, I really think I need to do it myself, just so I have the availability to record at 2:00 in the morning if I want to. And so that's been really good, but I tend to function better with a partner. The books I've written have been with partners. When I have somebody I have to be accountable to, my ADD is awesome with that. So trying to be accountable to myself is definitely harder. And if anything throws a wrench into the works, I'm able to adapt, but then I'm running to catch up, which is what I'm doing right now, actually. So, but yeah, scheduling would be my number one reason.
Yeah, I can understand that. For me, it was very similar, a mix of reasons, a lot of it necessity. To start with, being autistic, I'm a little bit particular about things. And so I had a very specific vision about what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to pick the topic I wanted to do. I wanted to do the voice that I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to run it on the schedule that I wanted to do because at the time I was working in the nuclear industry and traveling all over the country, working night shift, working swing shift, working 14-hour days. So I recorded when I could, as I could, and trying to find someone who could do all of that would have been a nightmare. But I have recently started to think about maybe I don't always have to do everything by myself, and I'm trying to, in the early stages of starting up an actual play podcast with actual people, which is a very, very different experience. Good and bad. One of the most beneficial things, which leads into our next topic, is that having a group of people makes it a lot easier to bounce off ideas, to start talking to people about things you want to try. And when you're doing it by yourself, you've got to come up with all the ideas all by your lonesome. So let's start with Bobby, who's been doing this forever. How do you come up with an idea every week for a weekly show?
So I do not do evergreen content. So it is, just in time content. It's usually about whatever thing happened in the gaming industry in the past week. And there's always something. There's always something I can talk about, either ripped from the headlines or an event that I went to, or anything like that. So the idea is basically before I'd go on each show on Sunday night, I will put together like 2, maybe 3 headlines that I want to talk about in news articles. And then that's what the first part of my show is. And then the second part is roundtable with the chat audience. And so they provide the topics. Also, we use our Discord server, and people can actually suggest topics that they want to have talked about on the show. So sometimes they come up with the ideas for me during the week, and then I just vocalize them on Sunday nights and give them a platform. So it's really ripped from the headlines, which means that, a show of mine from 6 months ago isn't really relevant now, unlike, evergreen content. But that's what has kept me going and kept things fresh for 19 years. And the structure of the show today is just about the same as the structure of the show of episode 1. I'm just a little better at it.
Fair enough. Travis, what about you?
I mean, I have it fairly easy in that respect because I get a different guest every week to be on the show, and because we have a movie to talk about, it's really just about finding the guest and what they want. What movie do they want to do? Do they want to bring me something that's really important to them, maybe that I haven't seen, which has happened quite a few times? Or do they have something on their list of shame that's the movie that people have always told them they need to see and they just hadn't seen it? And then that's where it goes. And because the show is very conversational, it does end up being a little bit more evergreen in the fact that you could go back and listen to episode 1 of my show, and it's going to be just as relevant as the current episode, just not as polished. I've gotten better at what I do as far as like keeping the conversation flowing. But basically, it's just getting great guests is how I keep things fresh.
That does sound fun. Your show does sound like a lot of fun to be on.
Given that I have done it,
it is a lot of fun to be on.
This week will be episode 277, and I started it 278 weeks ago. So I've missed 1 week in the entirety of the run so far. So I have a lot of fun with it.
That
It is fun.
Impressive. Tyra, what about you?
So I have Google Drive and I have Google Sheets. Tyra can't talk or think now. And so I have like a whole list of brainstorming ideas. So anytime I think of one, I just put it down there. But I also have guest on, and I have a guest form that they fill out. And part of it, which I need to send one to a couple of you, says, is there any topic or anything specifically you want to cover about while we're talking? And so that kind of gives me some jumping off points to get the conversation started. And also, if it's anything like if I want to talk about Star Wars, I'm going to go find myself a guest who loves Star Wars. So we already have a a common thread. But yeah, I just write down everything, and I finally decided that maybe I shouldn't write it down on paper. I should put it electronically where I could find it when I needed it.
That is helpful. I have an entire phone full of ideas that I will definitely come back to and totally remember that are there. I definitely don't forget they're out. They exist. Clint, what about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of like Travis, and I'm unlike Tyra in that I write down nothing. So the thing that works for me, and it kind of works for me by necessity, because I always have guests, right? But I don't prep at all, and part of that is because I can't. I have too many things going on, and my show wouldn't exist basically if I had to also prep. It works for me because just I do have a natural curiosity about people. So generally, what I do is I sit down. And I usually have a kind of an idea of what I want to talk to them about. And if I don't, I usually just start with, where are you from? Which is a Mark Maron trick. And it always leads to good stuff because you start getting about their background, you start figuring out what drives people, and that, of course, leads to other questions. So that's just an easy way to start. But yeah, it's in terms of it's kind of in the moment for me. And it's very much just that I have a natural curiosity about what drives people. And when you start, what I've learned is that you'll hear a little something, and you have to trust your instinct to just ask a little bit more. And sometimes you might ask the same question really 2 or 3 times, but you just ask it in slightly different ways, and then suddenly something opens up, and they're like, "Well, actually, here's what happened," and that's when you get to the good stuff. That is a process that works for me. I don't know if it would work for everybody, but it's also kind of the only way that my show could exist. Otherwise, I wouldn't have time to be able to do all the other, great things that professionals do that I don't do.
Completely understand. Yeah, my process is probably a mix of all of that. It's a little bit going, what's in the media right now? Like I've been wanting to go back to the Greekness with Percy Jackson being a whole thing, which is definitely a thing that's coming back to Dragon Con. Going to be talking about that and looking forward to doing all that Greek god goodness. But a lot of it's also going, what don't I know any mythology about? Where's a place I've never heard a story of? And then just start Googling to see, can I find anything from there? Really trying to dig to find primary sources, which is shockingly difficult. It's a lot of white people from the 18th and 19th centuries who wrote things down and were totally unbiased about it, definitely didn't insert any weird stuff in there that you have to unpack. Never happens. And I also do keep that list on my phone, which I definitely am going to go back to at some point. I promise myself I will find all that. And then also Google Sheets of all of the ideas that I randomly think of that I'm trying to remember to go back to. And also that way I keep a list of all the things I've already done so I can go back. Have I talked about this already? And usually no. Usually I'm pretty good about remembering what I've already discussed, but it's happened. So I really liked what you were talking about, Clint, about your process or lack thereof and how that really works for your show. So I want to dive into that a little more. So Tyra, what is kind of your process for prepping for a show? What does that look like for you?
So ideally, I would take that form that people fill out and go look at their links and check them out, watch some of their stuff. But yeah, the Clint side of me kicks in, and I'm like, okay, I can be prepared, but probably not as prepared as I want to be. But I do try to have a topic list. Even if I'm soloing it and nobody else is going to be on the show with me, I still have some sort of pattern or list of things that I want to cover. So I just have an idea. And I use that again to write show notes afterwards. But during the show itself, it's partly off the cuff, and then partly I do like to do some research. So if I get a chance, I like to watch people's stuff. Like I was really happy Travis is going to be on my show. We had to reschedule, but I was really happy to be on his show first because I listened to it before and watched it before I went on, and then I was part of one, so I have a lot more questions that I can ask him. Not to mention we'll probably spend the entire time talking about Highlander.
As you should.
Absolutely.
And speaking of Travis, yeah, what does that process look for you?
For me, really, it boils down to I watch the movie that I'm going to cover that week. Typically, at least one thorough watch through. Sometimes I'll get a second watch because I'm always going through and finding like weird audio things during the movie that I can play and we can discuss, or if there's a compelling line of dialogue maybe that can spark a conversation, so I can use those for kind of jumping off points as well. But it's really watching the movie once, maybe twice, pulling that audio, as well as if it's a movie that I'm not familiar with, I try to dive into a little bit. I look for, well, okay, have there been reviews of this posted anywhere, either written or video? Get some perspectives on the movie, get kind of a pulse of what it was like maybe when it came out, or if it's an older movie, try to look at thoughts and reviews from people over time, find out information or trivia about the movie, things that I can bring up that can spark a conversation and keep that flowing. And then as far as my guests, I just say, watch the movie, bring your notes, bring your thoughts about it, and that's it. That's all they need to do. And I'll write down notes while I'm watching it too if something catches my eye. Like the episode that went up today, we watched The Never-Ending Story. And I've seen that a number of times, but I never paid attention to in the beginning of it when his dad is making his breakfast and he's just pouring orange juice and raw eggs into a blender and blending that up. And I was like, that's psychotic. I don't know what's happening back there. Like, what in the name of Rocky Balboa is his breakfast? And for whatever reason, I latched onto that. I don't know why. But I'd never noticed it before. So it's just stuff like that. But it's basically just watch the movie, come up with stuff to start conversations, and then once we get going, it ends up half of that going out the window because the conversation goes in directions I'm not prepared for. And that's one of the beauties of the show is I make the plan, I execute the plan, then I wait for the plan to go off the rails, throw away the plan, and just go with the conversation.
Gotcha. And Bobby, what about you?
Yeah, so like I said, it's mostly news headlines from the week. So, Sunday night, probably about, starting about 6 or 7 p.m. Eastern, which is about an hour before I go live, I'll look through our Discord server or, on the web, or just what I remember watching the video game news of the week, and put together kind of like a list of like 2, maybe 3 topics. And then I have a thing in Notepad, none of this Google Sheets malarkey from the 21st century. No, I am still stuck in the 20th century with my Notepad. And I put in like the headline, and then I like copy paste the text and say which source it came from. And then the only thing I actually script is the actual intro to my show, because I have 13 seconds in my intro where I actually have to I want to summarize 2 of the news stories. And that's the first thing anybody hears before they hear my actual podcast intro, but it's 13 seconds long. So I have to time it, and I do actually like practice it in my head once or twice. But everything else is like, I have the headlines, I have the text of the article, and then kind of just my thoughts from there, which I don't write down. Those come out at the while I'm speaking, and sometimes I even change my mind mid-sentence because I talk myself out of my original position, which is great. And since it's live, I can't take it back. But then the thing about being a solo podcaster is I'm also the producer. And like I said, we do this show live each time on Twitch, and I don't use this StreamYard stuff from the 21st century. Once again, I'm stuck in the 20th century. But we have a custom. I have some custom stuff that I put into OBS Studio where I actually have like a headlines thing on the left side, like the old Sports Center where they would like show the topics coming up next, and I have a button that advances it. Well, I've got to populate that with the order of everything I'm talking about. So I have to fill that out and figure out what I'm going to title the stream on Twitch. What am I going to put in the Discord's promo spaces on social media to show that I'm live? So that's the other part of it, is like, yes, that there's the part of me being on the air, but I'm also producing all of the content that has to show up around because I don't have anybody else to do that for me.
Wow. I can't imagine.
Stuck on that.
I can't imagine doing that.
Look, Clippy was just misunderstood. Okay. I am. It's just because, like, okay, maybe I'm Microsoft Bobby or Microsoft Bob. I don't know, but Clippy was misunderstood, and I miss Clippy. And yes, that AI is the AI I'm okay with.
Oh, I can't believe you're a Clippy apologist. Clint,
Don't worry, I'll change my mind halfway through.
Flip-flop.
To
I
close
love it
the
when
loop, Clint, is there anything you wanted to add?
Not really. I mean, like I said, I can't follow Clippy. No, I don't really prep. I kind of had this in terms of like process. I kind of had this realization that if I made a New Year's resolution that, okay, twice a month, I'm going to go have a cup of coffee or a beer or something with somebody that I think is really interesting. And everybody would be like, wow, that's great. What a great, thing for you to do. And that's all my podcast is just me recording my conversation with those people. And so I approach it exactly like I would. Usually if you were going to go have a cup of coffee like that with somebody that you thought was interesting, you'd probably have a couple sort of general ideas of what you were going to talk about. But you'd kind of let it flow once you got there, hopefully. And that's really all I do. That's my whole process. And often, for example, I've had some people that I'm praying that when their screen pops up, that there's going to be something in the background that's interesting. Like Bobby would be a gold mine right now. But it's great though, right? There's plenty of things. I'm like, oh, perfect. Like I had my publisher on, and he had been on another podcast that I knew a lot of my audience would have already listened to. They asked him all the questions I would have asked him. I was furious. And then fortunately, as soon as this window popped up, he had a cool sword in the background. And I was like, that's all I need right there. And then the conversation just went. And it went in all these sort of weird directions I would have never thought about. How his father collected letter openers and how he traveled around the world as a singer and all these amazing things that I would not have even thought about to talk about. So it's very much on a wing and a prayer. But that's the closest thing I have to a process.
But
Gotcha.
that's great because it's such a fun way to have a conversation is to just
it really is
go in relatively blind.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I wish I could do the seat of my pants wing and a prayer thing. I tried that at the very beginning. It does not work for me. I have a full script all the way through start to finish. I have literally hundreds of thousands of words at this point.
Awesome. Good for you. That's great.
No, it's a terrible burden.
You always admire people that do it differently,
You know who can help you with that? Clippy.
That's right.
The one benefit is spending that much time writing and then listening to the awful words that I wrote has really improved my sense of voice in my writing. I can write for myself now. That
you should take all of that and make a book.
I have two that at some point I will definitely finish the editing process on. I promise.
I love that. Finish the editing process.
So speaking of terrible burdens, what are some of the challenges of going it alone for you, Tyra?
Me.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I am absolutely my biggest challenge. That and chaos, because my life is a little chaotic. Thanks, Shane. And Dobby, the dog that came in and is now asleep. But I really am my biggest struggle. Like, I've got 5 episodes I need to sit down and edit, and finding the time and the brain space and the spoons to do it with is the biggest problem for me. Like, I was amazed when I asked for guests that I got so many people that were willing, that were so awesome. And so now I have a commitment to them. So that's good because that helps me with my I'm the problem. Yes, it's me. But now I got to follow through, and I got a lot to follow through on. So yeah, no, that's my biggest problem is finding the time. And sometimes it's finding the spoons because life here is crazy. And there's Dragon Con coming, and I have a crap ton of content I've got to get out for digital media. So there we go.
I'm sure none of us can relate to that at all.
No. If there's anybody out there that understands 3D printing, please contact me. Thank you.
No. Clint, what about you?
It's funny because it's not what I thought it would be. What I thought it would be the audio production. And again, so mine is super loose, and I don't edit a lot. I don't edit out the ahs and ums and that kind of stuff, whatever. I have a couple of plugins that I run over the audio when it's done to just clean up some of the background noise, that kind of stuff. And then that's pretty much it, unless my guest asks me to cut something out. Or if I have a podcast coming up Monday, her baby started crying, so she had to leave for like 3 minutes or something like that. I'll cut that stuff out, of course. But it's funny is what I have found, because I used to like, oh man, I want a producer. And I do want, if anyone wants to be my producer, please. But for me, it's actually the promotion is kind of the hardest part because when you're done, you're not done. You know what I mean? Because you're finally do all the things to get the podcast actually up. You need to do your show notes and you need editing and all that stuff. And it's like, I got to make an audiogram for this thing or something like that to let people know that it actually exists, because I have to give my guest value. My listenership is nothing that's going to move the needle for them, but the value that I often bring for my guests is that it gives them something they can point to, right? They can drop it in a media kit as something they did. It's something that they can send to their readers, listeners, audience, whatever, to say, hey, you can go listen to me on this thing. That was a good one. Whoever did so that is actually the thing. There it is. Clawstorm's wearing it. Clawstorm is probably handsome in the same way that I'm handsome. I'm wondering if that's why the hat's on the avatar there. But anyways, for me, that's actually the hardest part. Is it's kind of like everything that goes around it, doing all that stuff on my own. Because when you're done, you're not exactly done, because you still have to promote the thing and do all that kind of stuff. The other hard part, and sometimes, I don't know if I say this, I'm the person who has to tell people no sometimes, because I can't, for me, I can't always have authors on my podcast, because all my friends are authors. I know a ton of unpublished authors who want to come on because I want to build their platform and all that kind of stuff. And I can't have them all. And I wish I had a bad guy sometimes to be like, oh, well, I'd love to have you on, but this jerk over here keeps saying that I got to do this, that, or the other thing, or it's not just my decision, but it actually is pretty much just my decision. So that's kind of another, because I sometimes I wish I had somebody to blame, so that I could be like the nice guy and the good guy, but I don't have that. So that's a little difficult too.
Heard. Bobby, what about you?
So the challenges have been the fact that I will sometimes stop talking for a bit when I'm live, because I am trying to react to chat. Which is like that whole Clippy thing that happened earlier, reacting to chat. That's a skill that I've picked up over the last 19 years, going completely off the rails. But if there's not much going on, there's a lot of like silence and dead air for like 5, 6, 7 seconds. So I actually do have to go through and edit my entire show. I go listen to it. It's an hour long, so it takes me about an hour and a half to go through. I'm not editing out uhs and ums that much. If I overuse an or an because I'm stammering a little bit, I will probably take some of them out. But I'm going through and removing the dead air, because people listening in their car don't want to hear 9 seconds of silence. Live, it's okay, because they're also interacting and they're okay with it. So that's kind of been the biggest challenge, is, the fact that I don't have anybody else to rescue me when I am at a loss for words temporarily. Whereas when I have somebody else on, that doesn't happen, and I don't have to edit anything. It's perfect. But the other thing is the promotion. I am very bad at selling myself. I don't like selling myself. I don't think I'm as good as other people think I am. And Charles will agree with that. And Charles will probably beat me up the next time he sees me for saying that. But promotion is the harder part for me, because once again, there's nobody else I can pawn that off to. It's all me, which is why I don't have as big of an audience as you would expect from somebody who's been doing a video game podcast for 19 years. I have a lot of former listeners, but I also have a lot of people who've never heard of me. And that's on me. And it's just because I'm not putting in the work, which is why I literally don't quit my day job.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can vibe with that. Travis, what about you?
I kind of echoing a lot of what's been said. Like, the hardest part for me isn't doing the show. That's easy, and I've even I've refined that whole process over time. I don't do much editing. All of my 95% of my editing is done in my head as I'm producing the show, and I do a little bit here and there if somebody has to I have a technical issue or something. I'll cut that out. That's about it. But it's promotion, it's marketing, it's selling the show, it's growing the audience. That's all the hard parts for me, because I have terrible imposter syndrome, and I never think I'm as good as I am. And I get told by all of my guests all the time, your show's great, I love being on it, it's all that. And yet I'm still always surprised when people agree to be on the show. And I'm always nervous to ask. And then it's like I just do a terrible job of, after the show is out, getting beyond just a post on Facebook or Twitter or Threads or whatever that, hey, the show is live. I don't do a good job outside of that. I'm getting better. I'm working on finding some tools to do that. But that's been the hardest part for me, is just getting word out there beyond my small circle. So, yeah, that's the hard part.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with Clawstorm 100%. It is a Dark Souls boss. I have died on that boss about 100 times. I have not yet
big time.
figured it out, but I'm gonna get there. Yeah, I'm gonna have to echo everyone else that promotion is probably the biggest Achilles heel for me. I definitely struggle with. I mean, at the end of spending that time scripting and then editing, the last thing I want to do is promote it, and
Yep.
I don't really think anyone wants to hear me. So I'm like, I'll just throw it out there, and if anyone finds it, great. But that's always been a struggle, and honestly, I envy all of you that you're like, no, I don't really edit out that much. I am one of the most finicky, fiddling editors out there. I edit out every mouth noise, every breath, every and I think part of that's having misophonia, because that's the thing that it drives me nuts when I hear that on podcasts. I'm like, well, I got to get rid of it, but it takes me so much longer to do that. And that is a thing I'm going to have to teach myself not to do when I start doing this actual play, because that is not going to work. And I'm going to have to teach myself that, and I don't believe me yet.
So we had a couple of comments in the chat, so I'm throwing up Claustrum's question.
Good question.
That's a great question. So to read that out, does the lack of available collaboration when going in alone ever become a struggle? We learn so much from our peers, and not having them sometimes sounds like hard mode. So yeah, I'm going to throw that over to Travis to start.
I mean, yeah, it can be. One of the things that really has helped me, though, is after starting Wait You Haven't Seen and doing that for a while, I was lucky enough to be on a podcasting reality competition called America's Next Top Podcaster. So it was a competition show, 12 people, and we had weekly challenges of different styles of podcast or different elements of podcasting that we would do, broken off into teams, and one person would get eliminated. And I think they did 4 seasons of it. They're working on possibly doing a 5th one. And that was great because it got me out of a comfort zone. It got me working with new people that I hadn't worked with before. I met just a ton of amazing people that I'm still working with today. And so that helped me overcome that struggle, because at that point I was going it alone completely with just a couple of friends of mine that lived locally that would pop into the show every couple of weeks or whatever. I'd just rotate them through. And so getting to get over that hump and then just try to take that momentum and run with it and use what I learned there. I learned there were little bits and pieces of like editing stuff that I learned while working on that, or tips for interviews and for conversations and all of that. And so that was the biggest boon to my podcasting. And then after that, it was having other shows that I started doing, collaborating with people. So I started Let's Watch Highlander with my friend Audie, and he and I worked really well together and could bounce off of each other. So I had that, which then I could take things that maybe I learned about my own conversational style and roll it into the other show. And so it was just basically always trying to continue learning and growing and getting better week to week, month to month with whatever I was working on.
That is a fantastic answer. Bobby, I'm going to try to make you follow that.
All right. So I'm going to actually answer no. It has not been a struggle, and I'm going to explain why. Okay, so don't go away. I have actually never been alone on this journey, and I'm not just talking about the fact that I had a chat room from day one. And I had people I was interacting with. I was never talking to an empty room. But I've always been a part of a podcast network, even since the beginning. And so I had other podcasters that were around that I was collaborating with, maybe not during the 1 hour that I was on, but we were all talking to each other. And then even now on Voice of Geeks Network, I started it with Rob Roberts. Well, Orange Lounge Radio, the show he runs with some other people in his area, they're on right after me. So I actually dedicate the last 10 minutes of my show, or basically about like 8:50 p.m., I call him on Discord. We go on video at the same time, and we kind of do a throw. in terms of like he reacts to things that happened on that I talked about on my show. I ask him, what are you going to be talking about next on Orange Lounge Radio? And he talks about it. I'm like, all right, I end my show, his show starts, and it's kind of a seamless lead in. So I'm always collaborating with Rob, the other people on OLR, the other people on Voice of Geeks Network. And on my previous network, All Games Radio, I was collaborating with them. So even though they weren't there the 1 hour I was on the stream, we were always working together. So that, and then Dragon Con, you know, I've been a part of the Dragon Con, the old podcasting track since its inception. And that had some collaboration and learning from others. So I never felt alone in all of this because of the Dragon Con podcasting and now digital media community, and also the networks and the other gaming podcasts that were around. Because I used to be going to gaming events, so I talked with other gaming podcasts around at the time. So I just, even though they weren't there that 1 hour, they were there the rest of the week.
Gotcha. Yeah, I completely have to agree with you about the digital media track. That has also been my main source of collaboration and finding any kind of support so that I don't feel alone. Tyra, what about you?
So I agree. I think the digital media track is awesome to find people to ask questions of, communicate with. But I think with me, when I'm just doing my podcast and I don't have a guest, I do have some of that happening in the sense that I'll go back and listen to it and think, oh, well, that's crap. What was I doing? So I'll struggle with that. Like I'll question what I talked about and go, is that really interesting? Is anybody going to care? Why am I doing this? And I put out a few episodes before, and I actually had somebody comment on them, and that was a friend of mine. I was like, oh my God, A, people are listening. And B, even though I thought it was crap, it was more of the imposter syndrome and that, you know, being too hard on myself. So for me, it's trying to take that step back and not look at it in super Virgo perfectionist mode. Because I, like Clint, have to just kind of chop the end, chop the beginning, catch a few things in the middle if I need to and let it go. Otherwise, I'm not going to have time to do it. So that's my biggest struggle with going it alone, is having to learn all the skills and having to trust the process, which I'm not as good at as Clint is.
So Clint, over to you then.
Yeah, you know, I would echo a lot of the things that have already been said, but the other thing that I'll add to that I guess is a struggle, but it's kind of just more of a bummer, which is that success and failure is better shared, you know? And it makes me think about I used to be in a rock band in my 20s, and which is, by the way, the single most frustrating process of my life. And my favorite thing about being an author and podcaster is if it doesn't get done, it's my fault and nobody else's. But I do miss that feeling of that went awesome and having somebody to share that with, you know, or even, wow, that was horrible, but we're commiserating about it together, you know. I mean, I just think that human beings just function better in community, obviously. And I like having a team, and even as an author, because I'm traditionally published, which means I have editors and marketing people, you know, as solitary as being an author is, I actually still have a team that I can celebrate a success with if something goes well with the book. But with podcast, it's pretty much just me. And that's kind of a bummer. You know, you kind of wish that you had somebody, you know, to call after an interview and be like, I can't believe that. That was awesome. Or, wow, that was terrible. But then at least you can both kind of like laugh about it and be like, you know, we'll get them next time. So yeah, that part's a struggle for sure.
Yeah, heard. And yes, absolutely. Finding like-minded creators is absolutely a key ingredient in trying to get a podcast that feels good to you. And speaking of which, you know, we've been talking about challenges, but it's not all struggle bus. There are good things that come out of being a solo podcaster and doing the show by yourself. So, Tyra, why not? Let's talk a little bit about, you know, what are some of the benefits? What are some of your biggest successes?
So for me, the biggest success is just hitting the publish button. Every time I'm able to do that, I feel like I have, you know, won the lottery. Because for me, when you're doing it all yourself, when you don't have a producer and you're the one editing and you're the one doing the promotion and all that kind of stuff, when you just are able to get it out there in the wild, I think is the best thing ever. And for me, my biggest one was when I came back and I said, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make a commitment to myself because I need a creative outlet. that I can talk about the things that I'm interested in, whether that's Star Wars or crochet or writing or social media. I needed to be able to get that out into the universe. And if somebody wanted to listen, that was great. And when I started to have a conversation with somebody at Dragon Con once, and she had listened to my podcast and I didn't know who she was and I'd never met her before, I was like, yes, that's the most wonderful thing ever. When somebody you don't know telling you, yeah, I really enjoyed that. So for me, I think that would probably be my biggest win. But anytime I hit the publish button, I'm a happy girl.
Absolutely. Bobby, what about you?
So the biggest benefit is in real life, when there's not a microphone in front of me, I'm a huge introvert. And I have things that are in my head. And if I'm like in a group with people and I talk about something, if I get interrupted by anybody else in the group, I shut up. And what winds up happening is that then they continue on for 5 or 6 minutes, and then I don't get to finish my thought. The benefit of going in alone is that nobody can interrupt me, and I can actually get my entire thought out before somebody comes in and takes over the conversation, because it is very easy. And if you ever meet me at Dragon Con, you'll find this out. It's very easy to take a conversation away from me and I become a bystander, because that's just how I am. I am an introvert in that way. And you know what? One thing that always interrupted me was Clippy. So remember when I was talking about Clippy earlier and I liked Clippy? No, Clippy interrupted me, and I never forgave Clippy for that. So now I am on the hate Clippy train. Go Chat GPT.
I knew it was coming. I just didn't know when. I knew it was
We're on
happen.
a journey here, and
how soon?
I'm happy to see where it's going to go.
Oh, I'm here for it. Clint, let's go to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a privilege, the people that I get to talk to. It is amazing who will say yes sometimes if you just ask them. I had Max Brooks on my podcast, who is my literary hero. I could not believe I got him. And because I'm a solo podcaster, I had him all to myself for an hour. And it was amazing. I mean, like, if I could have chosen one person in the world to have my podcast, it would have been him, and I had him. And, this doesn't necessarily change my position. I'm like, in an ideal world, I'd probably have a partner or two. But I never have to have those moments where you're really hoping you're going to get a chance to ask the next question because you really want to dig into something, but then somebody else says something and it steers away, and you have to kind of do the, okay, can I pull it back or do I just let it go? I am floored by the amazing people that I get to talk to. And even when it's people that I already know, sometimes in this format, things just come out that you never knew about somebody. People that you consider close friends will just sort of open, which is kind of strange too. And I don't totally understand it because it's a public forum, but people will just open up. Right. And I get to have that, and I get to sort of see those through the way that basically my instincts tell me to, because I'm doing this alone. And if it was a little bit more of a group thing, I think that would get sacrificed a little bit. That sort of kind of intimacy of a one-on-one conversation, because I think what happens is that we sort of trick ourselves into forgetting that a lot of people are going to listen to this thing. And I think a lot of that would probably be lost if I had somebody else doing the podcast with me, which is why I think a lot of people who do have podcast partners and stuff, you'll see every so often they'll do an interview by themselves. And I wonder if that's on purpose. I wonder if they're like, this one I want to be able to really hone in.
Makes sense to me. Travis, what about you?
I mean, some of the best benefits of doing this has been just the breadth of people that I've gotten to meet doing this show, that I've either gone on to work with on my show multiple times, or spun out to do new shows and other projects, and just the amazing number of people that I've gotten to have conversations with and learn about. And on top of that, the movies have been so much fun, whether it's sharing my childhood trauma with a friend of mine this week and The Never-Ending Story, or somebody bringing me a movie I'd never heard of before that quickly becomes one of my favorite movies ever for whatever reason. It's been such a fun thing for me. And one of my biggest wins, because Tyra, you mentioned like hitting the publish button being a huge win, and it's true. And I can't take credit for this particular quote, but I loved it, and it has to do with making movies. Getting a film made is like throwing a dart from orbit and hitting a bullseye. just to get it made. Whether or not it's any good is irrelevant. Just have it finished and produced and put out there. And while maybe we're not throwing a dart from orbit, we're still up there a little ways, and we're hitting a bullseye every time you hit that publish button. And it's really fulfilling. And then to have somebody say, hey, I listened to your thing and I enjoyed it. I had a good time. I can't wait for the next one. It's such a great feeling because I like to entertain. And I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. I never got around to that. I never really just had the resources to pull that off. But I can do some entertaining here by talking about stuff like that. And then there was a personal big win for me. Recently, I did my show live in front of an audience in Las Vegas in a little conference room during a group meetup. I had, maybe a dozen people in the room to listen to the show, but it was 11 more people than I thought were going to show up for it. And it was a lot of fun, and there was great feedback to that, and just sitting in front of a group doing what I did and being able to do it in a way, in that way was a huge achievement for me and a huge win, and it also prepared me for when I finally am going to do that at DragonCon. So that was a big one.
Yeah, I completely have to agree with that. For me, going and doing those panels at DragonCon and having people actually show up and sit there and want to listen to you, and like last year, having people actually be turned away from the panel was just like, I could not believe. It's like, I'm nobody. Why are you here to see me? But at the same time, it's just this incredible feeling that like, oh wow, people actually do find an interest in this, and it is just an incredible feeling, and that's, I think, one of the biggest joys for me of doing the show solo. So I have to imagine that one of the reasons people might be tuning in is because they're thinking of starting a solo show. So let's go around and talk about what advice might you have for someone starting / what would you say to yourself when you first started that you wish you knew? So Bobby, let's start with you.
Don't name the show after yourself. Easy. Done. Right there. It's terrible for discoverability. You are not as big of a name as you think you are. You're going to do it. You might do it longer than you think you will. And so pick a better name. But that would have been the case if it was a multi-show. I guess what I would say is that get really comfortable with talking to yourself. And it's hard for some people to do that, but you need to talk to yourself, or something you can do. And this is also something like streamers, video game streamers, because a lot of times they're solo, a lot of video game streamers, and they don't have a chat room that's there to interact with them. And what I've heard some of them do is, like, especially if they're doing video or something, is they put googly eyes on their webcam, and then they name that webcam chat. And that's who you're talking to. Right there. You're talking to those. If you're doing it on audio, get a water bottle, put googly eyes on it, call it audience. And that's who you're talking to. So maybe, learning that earlier and getting used to that, because that is a very helpful skill, learning how to talk with yourself and not bring up the fact that you're talking just to yourself. Always make it seem like you're talking to someone, even if nobody is there.
Absolutely. Clint, what about you?
Yeah, this is building off of something that Bobby said. If you're gonna have guests, don't try to come up with clever titles for your episodes. Just have it be the guest name, because I burned so much time. I'm like, I've said of some variation of creative inspiration with who or something like that. Just put the guest name and move on with life. I might have to go just change all of my episode titles now, because I'm running out of inspiring phrases that I can put. No, the thing that I feel like maybe this is kind of my motto for this whole thing is, give it your best, but also don't overthink it. You know what I mean? Because it can be you'll never get started if you think about all the things you can't do. And there's a lot of things that go into a podcast. It's a lot of work, and there's a lot that goes into audio production and all this kind of stuff. But it's all fairly simple once you figure it out. It's not this stuff. It is a lot of work, but none of it is that hard. These are tools that you can learn how to use. Tools now are designed for laymen to understand how to use them and to do them effectively. So, if you start thinking about all of the ways that you're not professional, you'll probably never get started. So even if the best thing that you can possibly do is recording your voice into the microphone on your phone, but then, do that. And then, you don't necessarily have to put it out if you don't want to, or maybe you will. And maybe that will be your thing, because I do believe that if you're coming across authentically with content that you care about, and everyone here obviously has content that they care about. I mean, Bobby's been doing this for 19 years. Obviously, Bobby cares about video games, right? Obviously, Travis cares about movies. Obviously, Tyra cares about a lot of things. Obviously, you care about myths, right? Don't let all of those other barriers stop you from just doing the thing that you have this passion in you to do. And even if the quality's bad sometimes, even if your mic messes up or you were accidentally using the stupid onboard instead of the nice mic that you have, and people will look past all that if you're bringing them good content. So just don't overthink it and just do your show.
That is a fantastic answer. Travis, what do you and your puppet have to say?
So number one, I want to back up what Clint just said. Enjoy what you're doing first. Do the show for you first, and the audience that you deserve will come about from that. But if you don't have the passion behind it, it doesn't matter at all. It really doesn't, because that's going to come out. People are going to notice that. You can only perform so much before it becomes stale. So that would be one. Practice. You mentioned, recording yourself into your phone. Practice that first. Just talking to yourself while you're driving somewhere, or, hit record, throw it in the seat next to you, and just talk for a while. And get used to that feeling, and then listen to it and listen to your speech patterns and figure out how you can make that, you can self-edit a lot of those ums and uhs out of yourself by listening to how you talk. The other one that I would give, and this is the advice that I would give to myself if I were starting back out, don't do a weekly show. Don't pigeonhole yourself into that, because I have become a podcasting shark, and if I stop podcasting now, I probably will just shrivel up and die, and so I have to keep going. But structure your show. Give yourself seasons. Build in breaks, because burnout can happen very easily. So don't be afraid to build in time to step away, recharge, and come back at it with something better. And that would be the biggest thing that I would say.
Absolutely. Tyra, what about you? What sage advice do you have?
Being a marketer, I'm just going to go with Nike and say, just do it. To me, it's the stepping off the cliff. You just have to, I've said this a couple of times in chat tonight, trust the process, particularly connected to Clint and how he trusts the process when he interviews somebody. But there is that trust the process, trust yourself, and jump off the cliff and just do it. And then after you do it, do what TV Travis said, listen to it, because you will learn so much from listening to yourself. So my primary job is a professor, and so I do a lot of online class videos. And that's how I learned that my favorite word is so. So let's get started. So how are we doing? Let's look at this. So I know so is my word. I still say it, but now I try to self-edit because it's a lot easier to do that. And ask somebody to be on their show to see how it feels like, to get a feel for it. Go be a guest. I love being a guest, obviously, because I've been on Travis's show and Clint's show. I've never been on Bobby's, but Bobby's come on here with me when I needed him one night. And just get yourself immersed in it and see where it goes, because you never know.
That's really good advice,
absolutely.
Too.
It is.
Being a guest, because you're right. You don't. That way you can understand how they're going to feel a lot better.
Yeah. Well, and you just learn so much by watching somebody else do it. I had to learn how to run chat. So when I'm not looking at the screen or at people, I'm running the chat while we do this. And that's a skill you learn from watching how other people do it.
Absolutely. And I definitely want to echo something that our resident rock god said in the chat, which is to, before you get started, record a test episode that you don't intend to release and listen to it and find all those mistakes you're going to make. It is a thing I really, really wish that I had done, because going back and listening to that first episode is rough. That's when I realized I need a script. And if I had it to do over again, that is definitely a thing I would have done. And that is definitely a thing I am doing on the new show that I am working on, is trying to make sure that I have those test episodes and know what I'm going to sound like. And the other piece of advice, particularly if you're doing a scripted show and you have this freedom, record a little bit in advance. Give yourself that buffer. You're going to thank yourself later when something comes up and you already have something in the can and you can go ahead and throw that out there and give yourself a little flexibility. There's a thing I did not do early on, and I'm really glad that I do now.
Yeah.
So I
would
really
also
love
say-
this. Somebody that doesn't have a schedule and just drops them randomly so people get excited.
That's pretty good.
The content marketer in me went, yee! But
Another thing I would say too is fail. You're gonna have some things that fail that you do. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with failing because you can learn from that. You can learn from a mistake you make. You can learn from maybe an interview that doesn't go that well. If you're going that route, you always learn from whatever you're doing, and be prepared for that. And be prepared for eventually getting feedback, both positive and negative, and how to take that feedback too, because you're probably going to start with feedback from people that know you, and it's going to be much more positive. But be prepared for the time somebody's going to come in and just be like, you're an idiot, and whatever you said is stupid, because it's going to happen. And more times than not, it doesn't matter, but just be ready for that to happen to you.
Absolutely. And we're coming up on that 1 hour time limit, so we're going to need to draw this to a close. I do want to encourage people, if you're looking for that networking experience, DragonCon is an amazing place to do it. Everyone is friends there. You wouldn't know it to see me up on those panels, but I have incredibly bad social anxiety. And so being at DragonCon has been a wonderful way to get myself over that hump and to meet people that I'm a little more comfortable with, have that venue where you can say, hey, what's your costume? Hey, what did you think of that panel? It gives you a nice intro to have those discussions and to get a little more comfortable with doing those networking things so you can do it more in a less fun atmosphere later. So, Tyra, why don't you bring us home with what's coming up next?
hi, not prepared at all. So it's my favorite thing not to be prepared. Okay, I've brought up my schedule. What day is it? It's the 10th. So next week on July 17th, Scott Moore, Groove is for Life, will be here showing me how to edit, better known as AKA helping Tyra not pull her hair out, because I don't want to look like Clint. Clint, you're very sexy, but not so sexy if that was me. And then on the 24th, Charles and Tyra will be talking to Seska Small, who's the track director for fantasy literature at DragonCon. So we're finally going to have our first DragonCon other track director here on the show. We're hoping to have some more. And then from now until really DragonCon, we're going to be doing a lot of DragonCon programming. So you'll be seeing some of our volunteers, Charles interviewing people, who knows. But if you would like to be a part of the Be Awesome Together, the con between the cons, that's what we are, keeping connected, please drop me a DM or send us a note somehow through one of the digital media channels, which you can find at Linktree DC Digital Media Track. And that's where we are. And Kaz, I just want to give a shout out to you because she's one of our volunteers. She always drops in our chat. She's always here for our live stream. Do say hello to her at DragonCon because like Clawstorm said, volunteers make it happen.
Absolutely. And so I want to thank everyone who tuned into this incredible conversation, and especially thank you to my wonderful guests. Let's go around the horn one more time, remind everyone who you are and where they can find you. Clint.
Clint Hall, easy to find, clinthall.com, and the Experience Conversations with Creatives podcast.
Excellent. Bobby.
So the Bobby Blackwolf Show is the name of the podcast. It's on all the podcast platforms, but it airs live on the Voice of Geeks Network Twitch channel on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, twitch.tv/VOG Network. You can also find more information at vognetwork.com or on my link tree, Bobby Blackwolf.
Amazing. Travis.
Travis, aka TV's Travis. I do a show, Wait You Haven't Seen. You can find that on any podcatcher. I'm TV's Travis on any social network. But you can find everything that I do at tvstravis.com.
All right. And Tyra.
I'm Tyra Burton, and you can find me at tyraburton.com or at that Linktree address that I actually have to go and look up every single time, which is how blonde I am. But you can find me there. Geek Meet Social comes out hopefully once a week, but usually not.
All right. And once again, I am MC Williams. I host Myths Your Teacher Hated. It is at all of your favorite podcatchers. You can also find us at mythsyourteacherhated.com, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, all the fun places. And so thank you all for coming, and make sure you come back to this fine podcasting StreamYard for more goodness to come.
And Clippy's okay.
As Charles said, Clippy time with Bobby.
Clippy.
Thanks, guys. Everybody wave. We're getting the stream out.
Bye.
Bye.